The IMF has taken note. That's a big breaking input we are now bringing to you as far as putting or exerting that pressure on behalf of the IMF is concerned. Let's in fact bring you those breaking inputs. Top government sources are telling CNN News 18 that as far as IMF clearing a $1 billion bailout for Pakistan, India has abstained from the recent International Monetary Fund vote. This was with regards to the loan that was being doled out to Pakistan. Not because it lacked opposition, but because the fund does not allow member countries to vote no. Otherwise, remember, India was all set to vote and cast a negative vote. But this time around, India has abstained. By choosing to abstain, here's the message. India has sent a strong message of disagreement. It has raised concerns over Pakistan receiving repeated financial support 28 times in the past out of 35 years, including 4 programs in just the last 5, without any meaningful reforms coming from these global economic institutions, primarily the IMF. India has also criticized the Pakistani military's deep role in economic matters and warned that the money could be misused to support cross-border terrorism, posing serious risks to global credibility and values. On that big breaking input, I'm joined in by Siddhant Mishra, who will break down that big message that India has sent out while abstaining from that very crucial vote. Siddhant, first of all, many would want to know why hasn't India cast a no instead of abstaining?
This is where India demands reforms at the international institutions. In fact, talking about IMF, if you allow me, then I would like to draw a larger context to this particular development. So there is no vote policy at IMF. Perhaps a country with more economic might has more say, and in fact, decisions are largely taken on the basis of consensus. So India does not, India cannot, or any of the members cannot exercise no to the bailout. And this is the reason that India decided to abstain. Perhaps the IMF has also of India's abstention, and it is kind of a message which India is sending out to the world that India has provided evidence, material. Time and again, India has raised this issue that a country which is surviving on IMF bailouts perhaps is spending equal amount of money for its defense budget. Says about the priority of that country, etc., etc. And today again this happened. India, in fact, this issue was raised. India's abstention was also taken note by the IMF. But as I said before, that again, this is where India demands reform at the international institutions. Perhaps a terrorist state which is directly involved in killing 26 innocent people. Last month on 22nd of April, perhaps is again getting loans from IMF. In fact, because the bigger countries with the bigger economic might have supported this bailout again.
That's very important, Siddhant. I'm going to request you to continue staying with me. In fact, I'm joined in by Professor Brahma Chalani at the moment for more perspective on this. Professor Chalani, thank you for joining in. This is a big development, as Siddhant was highlighting and sharing the reasons why this is an abstention and not a no. Also, break down for us, how do you weigh in on the statement, which is a very sharp and pointed one that's come out from India?
First, this IMF bailout approval has followed a staff agreement with Pakistan. So the right time to lobby with IMF was when IMF staff were negotiating with Pakistan. At that time, we did not raise a voice. What happened today was a pro forma approval. Once a staff agreement has been reached with the country, the IMF board normally, unless there is something extraordinary that comes to the notice of the board of the IMF, the board normally approves the staff agreement. So the lobbying should have been done much earlier. At this stage, it was very difficult for India, even with US support, for example, to block the staff agreement with Pakistan. The US administration, the present one, is quite India friendly. They know that Pakistan is deeply involved in terrorism. The right thing to do would have been to lobby in in January or February, to prevent such a staff agreement from being reached. But actually, it goes back to the Biden era. When Joe Biden was the president, he began this bailout process for Pakistan. There was a big bailout that he helped secure for Pakistan. And then soon thereafter, he announced a $450 million deal to modernize and upgrade Pakistan's F-16 fleet against India. Look at the irony of it. On one hand, the US under Biden pressed IMF to bail out Pakistan because it was bankrupt or on the verge of defaulting, and then they signed a $450 million deal to modernize Pakistan's F-16 fleet without securing any commitment on counterterrorism. And even at that time, the Indian government did not raise its voice. So, we have a record of only raising a voice when there is a crisis that is facing India. So today, because of this military conflict, we spoke up, but it was too late.
Thank you for making that very critical point, Professor Chelani. And I want to, also ask you about the entire statement that has come in. Do you think that that statement is hard-hitting? Even though it is hard-hitting, as you said, that we seem to have already missed the bus at a time when there's a lot of chatter about how we can exert pressure on Pakistan through these monetary institutions, whether it is the IMF or even make efforts to bring Pakistan back on the FATF grey list. How is this move in your point of view?
I think India needs to mount a sustained international campaign to spotlight Pakistan's nexus with terror groups. This tendency in India to speak up when there is an act of Pakistani-sponsored terrorism, or there are tensions along the border or the LOC, that's not the right way. You have to do it on a sustained basis. You have to then press each institution. For example, the FATF allowed Pakistan to exit the grey list. At that time, India could have built a coalition. Of course, the Biden administration, along with China, helped Pakistan to exit the FATF grey list. But you have to start building a coalition months ahead. And you can't do it just when FATF is meeting. Similarly, in the case of IMF, you can issue any statements that you wish to make. But to pressure IMF, you have to build a coalition. Because India is only one important country in the IMF. It doesn't have a veto power in the IMF.
Okay.
But certainly can help build a coalition.
That's another very important point that you made, Professor Chelani, and that's the point that I would like to take forward with Lieutenant General Iyer, who's also on the broadcast with us. He's the ex-chief of the staff at Northern Command, and I'm also joined in by Captain M.J. Vinod, who's a defense expert. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining in. But if I could bring in Lieutenant General Iyer. Sir, that's an important point that Professor made, and that's why if you go by the consensus, as they say, that unlike the UN over here, as far as the IMF is concerned, the vote goes by the economic power that each country wields, which means that the United States has a significant sizable vote in the IMF. What is one to make at a time when the United States is maintaining consistent engagement with New Delhi? Should we expect or shelve any hopes from the US to play a critical role over here?
Firstly, I will take it, Professor Chelani took it back to January. I'll take it back to August, September of last year.
Okay.
It was around that time when, they got out of the FATF grey. They were one of the major contributors of ammunition to the Ukraine requirements, which was something which Biden administration was pushing. So they were like Biden's gang at that stage of time. And by the time the elections happened in the US and the new administration came in, and it was too late because this IMF bailout had already passed that staff test. Thereafter also till the month of April, there was no other significant reason for us to start pushing for putting them on a grey list, as well as, getting this bailout out. So to some extent, we have been trying for the last 2 weeks, but 2 weeks is not an adequate amount of time. And let us have trust in the current American administration. They are well abreast with the kind of activity that is happening in Pakistan. I am personally very sure that next time when it comes up for the FATF relisting, Pakistan will find itself into trouble. My only piece of concern is 2 weeks down the line, though we have accused Pakistan of this Pahalgam incident, we have to back it up with real concrete evidence.
Yes.
That is somewhere we need to work much harder. We have to connect the links between what happened in Pahalgam to the Pakistani administration. And by the time they come up for the next set of loans, it should be very clear that Pakistan is a country which is fostering terrorism once again, and they deserve to be treated in the manner they were treated last year. And the third thing I would say is $1 billion in the current scheme of things, we should not get too much worried about. I'm sure it is just maybe another 6-7 days of war stamina if you equate it towards completely being employed towards this war waging efforts. And should this conflict go any further north and we find ourselves into a limited or a long drawn engagement with Pakistan, this $1 billion is not going to last. So let us not get worried about it. Let's stay focused on the current situation. I still agree, and I keep saying this every time whenever I get an opportunity. The I part of the time syndrome, we have not doing so well. We have not been able to communicate our intentions correctly. Whereas we have done very well on the diplomatic side, we have done exceedingly well on the military side, we have done fairly well on the economic side. Because the communication aspects are not good enough, we are not able to get the kind of results that we should have got by now.
No, I agree over there. I agree over there. But where I do disagree is that $1 billion funding, as you're saying, may not result or yield too much of war stamina. But the fact is, it's not just this $1 billion bailout that we are looking at, or an additional funding, which is what they are calling it, because there's been a consistent sort of bailout pattern that's been coming out of IMF, and that goes all the way back to 1958. And that's why I want to bring in Captain Vinod on that note. Sir, there's so much chatter about how the global consensus is standing with India in solidarity. And so when you talk about that global consensus, will that yield any results, especially in a body like IMF, which is governed by consensus?
And listen, I mean, without, sounding very different from my position, for the sake of viewers, let me explain this particular thing to you. See, professional, I don't want to use that word, but for want of a better word, I'm using this word. A professional beggar knows exactly how to dress up before he goes begging. So in FATF, when you go to take the money from IMF and not to get into FATF grey list, Pakistan has done a large amount of work. Before you go and submit your application, Pakistan knows exactly whom to go and meet, what to say, how to say. Germany, US, before it goes to IMF. To stay out of grey list, Pakistan doesn't need to go knocking on the doors of US. It needs to go knocking on the doors of Australia. Why? Because in the FATF, we have something called an APG, Asia Pacific Group. In the Asia Pacific Group, the permanent chair is Australia, and you have a rotating co-chair. And the Philippines, and last year when they got out of it, it was Malaysia, and they had a tacit understanding that when you have a bailout, you will return what is owed to Malaysia, which they didn't return. And if you remember, that big thing happened when PIA Airlines was captured by Malaysia. Because they promised that paisa will be given, paisa diya nahi, aur yahan inko ullu bana ke chale gaye. So these kind of things, a professional person who knows how to ask for arms knows very well. I was not surprised that they will get this money because they have done their homework very, very well. For the next bailout, they have already started their work. And for the next bailout, they have already must be doing their paperwork. So they're extremely professional about it. And like Professor Brahma Chalani said, you have to beat them in their game. You cannot be, beating them in their game 1 day to go, 2 day to go. Nothing is going to happen. By calling somebody 1 day before the money is going to be allotted and hoping like hell that the money will not be allotted when professionally he has addressed and plugged all the holes a month ago, impossible to do. But my limited point is, in the last 3-4 days, the amount they have spent is much more than the amount that they may get. And it is not that FSTF sanction, aaj hua hai, you will get money today. No, it takes 1 month, 2 months to come into your account, and when you start spending. So that itself is
Right,
something which is not going to aid in this particular operations.
No, I agree with you that they do their homework and they do it bloody well. But Professor Chalani, I think the example that's been quoted of FATF is living testimony, because remember, they convicted a Sajid Mir or even a Hafiz Saeed only till the time they wanted to get off the grey list of the FATF. Once they did, they were back to their proxy games of terrorism. And that's why I want to bring you in on that point, that why haven't these global monetary institutions like the IMF or the World Bank been able to do much when it comes to addressing terrorism? I can't help but ask that, are they not equally responsible for what we are seeing happen in Kashmir?
The thing is that as long as Pakistan does not export terrorism to the West is actually not concerned about Pakistan exporting terrorism to India, because then it becomes a regional issue for them. And in an old India-Pakistan problem, where the two have been at loggerheads for decades now. But they all know that over the years, the footprints of many terrorist attacks in the West were traced to Pakistan. The US found Osama bin Laden living next to the Pakistan Military Academy, and other top terrorist leaders that the US wanted, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or Abu Zubaydah, they were found living in Pakistan's heartland. But then under previous US administrations, the Pakistani government, especially the ISI and the army chief, promised to Washington that they have started cleaning up their act, that they will never repeat what happened previously. They pledged that they will not do anything to undermine US or Western security. So with those assurances and pledges, the US, under some administrations, for example, under Biden, resumed cozy ties with Pakistan. And we saw how Biden, for example, really helped Pakistan secure the first IMF bailout, then managed to get Pakistan off the FATF grey list, helped modernize Pakistan's F-16 fleet, while we didn't really press our case at that time. We did not. We were being too nice. We thought that if we were to exert pressure on the Biden administration, this could strain US-India relations. No, we should have actually said that what Pakistan is doing is a threat to global security, and that India's efforts to pressure Pakistan to clean up its act is actually good for the world. It's not just an India-Pakistan issue. It's actually about international security. The IMF bailout, and there was a big bailout that was initially supported by Biden administration, and
Yes.
now we are now the second bailout.
Yes.
But the IMF bailout is actually great leverage for the US, because as you rightly point out, that the US has a virtual veto power in the IMF, and Pakistan needs the IMF bailout, not just because of the amount of money, because the IMF bailout allows Pakistan then to secure loans from elsewhere. For example, this latest release of $1 billion, this immediate release, immediate $1 billion are being released to Pakistan
and
now.
we all know where it's going to go.
Yes, but more importantly, because of this $1 billion deal, Pakistan now will be able to secure additional billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia and China. They were waiting, China and Saudi Arabia were waiting for this IMF agreement. And now $1.2 billion swap deal with China will go forward, and there will be another major package from Saudi Arabia.
All right, I think you've made another very critical point. Lieutenant General Iyer, how do you weigh in on that? That actually does sound alarm bells at the moment, because as we've been talking about, India has also stated it in the IMF that the Pakistani army, the military, has a lopsided sort of sway over the economy in Pakistan and how the funding is going to be utilized. So that indeed is a cause of concern now, even if it is just going to be slightly over $1 billion.
I can't agree more with Professor Chalani. It's covered almost all the facets of this bailout. My only point here is whether this bailout came or not. The funds flow from both China and Saudi Arabia, if not through the front door, from the back door, would have continued. But this does give them legitimacy to now push through loans. These are ultimately loans. Like Pakistan, somebody said, Pakistan budget is, every budget tells us what is to be repaid and where the loans are going to come to repay the next year's, next year's budget. So it is a kind of a continuation they are living in. They are living in dangerous situation. No country would like to, have so much of external debt as Pakistan is. Their economy is in shatters. A war of maybe even 15 days is going to make their life miserable. They just cannot afford it. And I am very sure this 1 billion, like Group Captain Augustine said, it is not going to be of much use. A couple of jets going down and this $1 billion worth will, get covered over there. Possibly in the last 4 days, they have taken losses more than $1 billion as it is. But that having said, unfortunately, we are making Pakistan India-centric. And that is something we need to tell the world that the problem is not just going to be in India. Tomorrow, this epicenter of terror is going to bite everybody. Somebody said, keep snakes in your backyard and they're going to come and bite you. This point has to be rubbed into the Americans. 9/11 happened because there were people who were, raised by the Americans in the 80s. They came back and bit them in the late 90s. The same thing can happen through Pakistan in some stage of time. This has to be told to the Western world, and that's why, again, I said, we have to be much more active in the info domain. We have to be ballistic in the info domain. Our people should be able to communicate the points of view, our troubles, and also tell the world what is going to hit them later. We can survive, but will this be harmful to the world has to be told. And the last point I would like to add here is, possibly in the later half of last year and early part of this year, we were too focused on China. Our entire interest was trying to find a way to de-escalate with China because it was running into the third or fourth year. We were still worried that this is something which, and possibly we neglected Pakistan as possibly something which is not of, importance to us. And I guess, because I remember I've been in service and in an operational command, and we were literally only focused towards the north, and we're not looking in the west at all.
Okay,
I guess,
Captain Vinod, I want to bring you in. Lieutenant General Iyer and Professor Chalani both have highlighted how India's homework should have begun much earlier, and perhaps we had distractions at the LAC as well, which perhaps kept us more focused on China front. But now that the Biden administration is gone, you have an administration which is more serious about tackling terrorism, something that we can stand by with the arrest or the extradition of Tahawoor Rana. What, in your view, could sort of perhaps expedite the US support when it comes to, tackling or exerting greater pressure via institutions like the IMF?
Great question. In fact, just tell the viewers, their foreign office, the Section Affairs office equivalent of ours, has a separate division which is looking at only IMF loan bailouts and the paperwork and everything. There are a whole lot of people working in that particular department who are only looking at this. Now, let me draw a simile because I'm being a military man. You say, you stay across Amritsar, they deploy one division or two divisions of force. Will you keep quiet? You will also deploy one or two divisions of force, isn't it? Similarly, in our external affairs ministry, we should, I mean, maybe they will learn a lesson. We should have a separate division continuously working to get these buggers into gray or blacklist, all the time. Career, officers should be working permanently to get these guys, give the guys what they deserve, which is blacklist. Else, it is going to bite us badly. And like Sir said, a couple of years went by when we lost focus on Pakistan, which is we are paying dearly for it. And I mean, I'm mincing no words. Even today, I think we are not giving it back to them as much as they deserve it. We can and we should, is my feeling. But then there are better brains taking better calls, so I leave it to their
Okay.
judgment. Otherwise, what we are seeing on the screen, we should not be seeing on the
No,
second or
I
third
agree.
day.
Why were we waiting for a 22nd of April for the situation to have arrived to this point? But Professor Chalani, take a moment to weigh in on the reliance that Pakistan has had on the IMF, which goes, I will again say, it's gone over for decades. 1958, I have the entire list of all the bailout fundings that have gone. And it all began in 1958, 8th of December to be precise. And I can't help but say that, if it is about snakes in the backyards, when will they stop, in fact, harboring these snakes in the backyard? You expect better from the Trump administration.
Two things stand out. This IMF bailouts for Pakistan began during the Cold War, when Pakistan was a surrogate of Western powers. So it was easy for Pakistan then to secure IMF bailouts. And once you get one bailout and you don't do your reforms, you become more and more dependent on IMF. Let's say, getting IMF money is actually quite slippery for many countries because IMF imposes conditionalities that are pretty tough. And once you get into the IMF bailout trap, you continue to you continue to need more and more bailouts. And this has been Pakistan's story. And the second is that over the decades now, since the first coup in Pakistan in the late 1950s, which actually coincided with the first IMF bailout, Pakistan has been ruled formally or informally by the military continuously now. And the military dominates not only the society, it dominates the politics, it dominates the economy. There are very few countries in the world where the military not only calls the shots in politics, but even the shots in the economy. There are very few examples of this kind in the world. So Pakistan is a very unique case. It's an abnormal state where the military and the intelligence agencies are not even accountable to the government in office. For example, today, the way the military operates, Shahbaz Sharif is only the surrogate of General Munir. So this is a very abnormal state, and that's the reason why, to answer your question, this dependence on bailouts has never left Pakistan.
Absolutely. And Lieutenant General Iyer, we are looking at a year which is very critical to some partnerships that India has, and we'll be playing host to the Quad Summit. And when you talk about it in such a year, is this partnership with, say, Japan, Australia and the United States of America only limited to the Indo-Pacific?
Unfortunately, the Quad is only limited to the Indo-Pacific and it is China-centric. I'm making no bones about it. That having said, I am looking at a brighter year ahead for three, four reasons. Firstly, the Russo-Ukrainian conflict is almost as good as gone. I guess it's just a period of time when the Americans, because the Trump administration is not going to be as actively involved with the Ukrainians as the Biden administration was. So I see that part of the world order changing in the coming part of this year. So Pakistan's value in supporting Ukraine and being part of the American setup will go down in due course of time. The second thing which Pakistan has done over the last 1 month, and they have been somewhat been able to play it down below the radar. They have been trying to reignite the Middle East by pulling out the Palestinian clause once again. Even I saw even during the PSL games, they had these save Palestine kind of things coming up, or crush Israel kind of things being taken up. I guess we did not catch that. We had a wonderful opportunity to play it up, but we did not. There is still an opportunity because Pakistan still relies on a lot of support from the Middle East. It feels that since it makes a cause for the Palestinians, the Middle East, especially the Saudi Arab and the Emirates, will come to its support as far as finance is concerned. Unfortunately, the last few months have seen the Saudis haven't played ball with them in exact manner.
I was about to come to that. Yes, go
Professor
on.
Chalani mentioned that possibly after this bailout, there could be a difference. Well, I want to see it to believe. But the way the Saudis have treated the Pakis in the last 6 to 8 months is actually, I'll go back to Group Captain Vinod's analogy, it's just like a beggar. So that having said, I do look at a better year ahead. Trump is somebody who's not going to get into bailouts of this nature. He's a businessman. We are going to have a very good trade deal with the Americans very soon, so we'll become valuable to the Americans. We will be able to, I hope, play this game of Pakistan being the epicenter of terror with this current. We have him. We are actually holding him by the neck. It's a question of how fast and how quickly we are able to squeeze him out and expose him to the world order. And this $1 or $2 billion is something which is not very alarming to me. Yes, it was a signal. Had this $2 billion not happened today, this complete CNP, as far as the comprehensive national power, which we have applied for the last 2 weeks or so, would have seen its complete domain being fully exercised. That notwithstanding, I'm sure when the Indus water doesn't come in time, his crops are going to suffer. He's going to face a lot of problems. Otherwise, his stock exchange has crashed. So he's into a lot of trouble as it is. I'm sure he's going to face massive floods in this monsoons because he'll not be able to regulate water because we are not going to give him any data of the kind of water we are going to release. So his standing crops are going to go down. He's going to face a lot of trouble. I'm seeing bad things happening to Pakistan in the next 5 to 6 months.
No, I agree with you, Lieutenant General Iyer, but today is also a wake-up call for India, and that's why Group Captain Vinod, I think when you're talking about global support, glad that Lieutenant General Iyer talked about Saudi Arabia. I want to bring you in on the kind of good offices we share with OIC nations. In fact, just a day ago, we had the foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia and Iran very much in New Delhi. So when you talk about our own consistent engagement with OIC nations through our own economic partnerships, whether it is with Qatar, Iran or Saudi Arabia, even UAE, can we not expect them to also come to our aid and rescue when it comes to exerting pressure via these institutions?
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at a decade ago or maybe more, YC willy-nilly was, most of the nations willy-nilly was against India. Today it is not so. In fact, most of them have given awards and such.
In fact, Prime Minister was in Jeddah. He was in Jeddah on 22nd, which happens to be the headquarters of OIC.
Oh, yeah. So the world is realizing the strength of A, our leader, B, as a country, us. And C, they are able to see that every time the Sharif comes, he's only coming. I feel sad for him. He's only coming with a begging bowl, and there is not much that he's contributing towards OIC as such, except probably, getting an epithet of being a terror factory. And I'm sitting in DC, speaking to many such people. The moment you say Pakistan, the synonym is terror factory, and everyone understands that because post 9/11 things have changed. The focus is totally different. And like Professor said, now post Russia's pullout and post the end of Charlie Wilson's war, the use of Pakistan to West, especially to US, is not much. And especially after they pulled out of Afghanistan, it is actually zilch zero. But yesterday, when Vance said it is the war between them and we have nothing to do, I knew then that the bailout is coming. That I knew then that Vance has not stopped it. Probably he or his people have given the go ahead for the money. And like General Iyer said, it is a signal, it's not the money. Had we succeeded in blocking this money in for next couple of days, probably things would have been different. Now, on this high that I got the money, maybe he'll continue for 1 or 2 more days. Over to you.
So, despite the austerity, inequality, poverty and the debt, Professor Chalani, they continue to fund terrorism. So, where have been the failings, if I were to say? I know if we were to begin from our own home with India, you've always maintained how we've lacked a strategy or a policy, a consistent policy towards Pakistan and terrorism sponsored by Pakistan. So, where have the failings been, especially from our end?
If you look at successive governments in India, you've never had a consistent Pakistan policy or a consistent China policy. Every prime minister who takes office seeks to reinvent the foreign policy wheel. I'll give you some examples. Vajpayee, he came to office, he took a bus to Lahore, he thought he could befriend Pakistan. Then, few months later, he publicly bemoaned that his bus to Lahore got hijacked to Kargil. He did not learn from his predecessors. He thought he could actually do what his predecessors had failed to do. Then he tried his luck with China. Again, he tripped. But that did not discourage him. In his last year in office, he again sought to befriend Pakistan. Then came Manmohan Singh. He made his peace overtures to Pakistan. And in return, he invited the horrific Mumbai massacre. And we did not even impose any cost on Pakistan for the Mumbai terrorist attacks. Then comes Modi. He lands in Lahore unannounced in late 2015. In December 2015, he thought that where Manmohan Singh had failed, where Vajpayee had failed, he could actually achieve friendship with Pakistan. And do you know what happened after he went to Lahore? The Pakistani military establishment was enraged that they thought that Modi was conspiring with Nawaz Sharif, the then prime minister. And so in response, they staged a series of major attacks in India, starting with Pathankot. And to investigate the Pathankot attack, we invited the ISI to come and join the investigations into the attack that the ISI had staged. So you can look at this just recent history, how successive prime ministers have not had a consistent Pakistan policy, and if I could, even describe how they have not even attempted to have a consistent China policy. So to a large extent, the problems that we are facing with Pakistan and with China, to some extent, they are because of our own failures.
I think that's a very valid point. Lieutenant General Iyer, in January this year, in fact, to be precise, we were learning of these long-range ballistic missiles being prepared by Pakistan that also led to sanctions being imposed by the United States. But how far did that go to curb Pakistan is what one is left wondering right now. Because remember, when the war began in Ukraine, Russia was sanctioned massively. Their assets were frozen, and that also went to an economic level. We've not seen the same happen in case of Pakistan.
Because Russia is, endowed with a lot of resources. When Russia was sanctioned, there was a feeling that Russian oil and gas will not get sold in the world, and Russia
Of course,
will be.
they didn't get impacted.
So they managed to work around the system, and Russia was much stronger a nation than Pakistan. We can't compare sanctions on Pakistan with sanctions on Russia. That is one. Secondly, I don't think the sanctions.
They actually gunned for Russia, which I don't see happening for Pakistan when it's a fact that they are harboring terrorism.
Because, like Group Captain Vinod said, Pakistan is not anti-West. You must understand that. Till the time the West feels threatened by Pakistan, they will not go the whole hog. They'll make noises, all right. They'll say, we'll sanction you, we'll cancel your loans, we'll put you on the grey list. In my mind, Pakistan should have been in the blacklist 2 years ago. Pakistan should have been in the blacklist way back in 2011 when Osama bin Laden was found within 10 kilometers of the Pakistan military academy. There was no reason, and it was not that Americans found him one day. They knew about it for more than a year and a half before they actually went in and got him out. So it is something which we have to possibly make a little more noise. We have to not neglect our Western adversary, saying that he doesn't matter to us. Somehow, like I said, in the last 2 years, we became
But
part
that's
of the
exactly what the US Vice President has said in his interview to one of the leading news channels in the United States, that we are not going to get involved in anybody's war.
So my larger point is, you started by asking, Quad. Quad is totally Indo-Pacific.
No, that's true. That's true. No, I was saying that this is just, the point behind asking that question was to actually say that this is just to actually use the analogy friends with benefits, because it suits you in the Indo-Pacific, which is why you've partnered with India over there, but it doesn't suit you when it comes to Pakistan. So we are not concerned about this particular conflict.
So when I can put my example to it, my last 5 or 6 years in service was since the time, the Quad started shaping up, and suddenly we decided there are, adversaries only in the north. West can be handled at any time. And in that window, possibly Doklam happened, then Ladakh happened, and we got fixated with China for definitely since 2020. And in that period, we have felt that Pakistan is already done and dusted with. Kashmir has been sorted out. We have abrogated Article 370. Normalcy has come into Kashmir. Pakistan has been dried up. They don't have the money to finance terrorists. We have been able to knock off all the militants or terrorists in the valley. Everything is hunky-dory. In fact, last year, we were, going gaga about the kind of, tricolors floating everywhere in Kashmir. We actually neglected Pakistan and his hold in some kind of such freak events inside Kashmir. And he's been able to, call the bluff and put us into a position that we are in today. I guess we need to ensure that all our, vulnerabilities are taken care of with equal amount of importance. And we can't just concentrate on one part of the world and be part of a world body just because the world feels that China is the next threat. I feel. Yeah.
I think you expanded it well. Group Captain Vinod, if you were to look at sanctions coming in from the United States, that's precisely the hypocrisy that I'm talking about. Whenever it comes to nuclear armament, that is a direct threat to the United States, but not terrorism.
See, let me tell you something, very simple analogy so that the viewers understand. See, for maintaining a consistent policy towards Pakistan is extremely, extremely important. Let me give you an example from my own home. My great-great-grandfather was Nambudri. Before he converted to Christianity. But before he did so, in our Bhagavati temple, he has written and gone, this is how the marriage, padati jo hai, he has written and gone. Now, everyone may disagree. But down the generation, we had to get married in that mandir, in the procedure that he had written and gone 500, 600 years ago. So that is how it should be. Your presidents and prime ministers can come and go. Your policy has to be consistent because everything else now stems from that particular, selection and maintenance of aim. That is point number one. Point number two, and very important issue is that we need to understand ये जो पीस का चूरन जो है ना ये पाकिस्तान के साथ बिकता नहीं है. They have shown it to us umpteen number of times. You can be peaceniks and go them and tell Babar, go back 8 times. The 9th time he'll come back and make a Babari Masjid. And that we have seen. And if we have not learned from that lesson, I think there is something seriously wrong in our psyche. We have to, change our thought process that the peaceniks and peace ka churn does not work with Pakistan. Pakistan understand, Garhwali mein wife se Garhwal mein कहावत है, थोड़ा मारे बहुत रोए बहुत मारे चुप. तो इनको ना बहुत मार के चुप कराना पड़ेगा. That's the only way they will learn. There is no other way they will learn.
Clearly, because, the financial sort of investments are just a mirage for the global community. And that's why I think I just want to have closing thoughts now. And that's why, Lieutenant General Iyer, I want to ask you, what will end this cyclical nature to the IMF bailouts, which we've seen happen for over 7 decades?
Before that, I just want to add one thing to what Group Captain said. When Pakistan lost the 71 war, they never accepted that loss. They have been trying to find at least one small occasion when they can, redeem it. Unfortunately, whatever they tried, whether it was Zia or thereafter it was Musharraf or now this gentleman, they never forget it. It's something I equate it with India beating Pakistan in ICC cricket matches and always beating them in all wars that they have fought with us. They can never win. As far as the IMF bailout is concerned, I felt had this bailout not happened today, he would have had to off-ramp it in a day or two. He had no other choice but to get off the horse. At this state, he could not survive. This particular, victory of sorts which he will claim,
yes,
I am sure DGISPR is going to go gaga about it. All his briefings will be talking about, how the world order does not see Pakistan as a terrorist state, that he's been able to get vindicated by getting the bailout.
And that's why I was highlighting that it's beyond just $1 billion. There are ramifications to it.
The only good thing that happened is we didn't vote against it; we abstained. That was one way of registering our protest, but not because otherwise we would have given even more scope to try and tell people that look who voted against us. Abstaining a vote does not mean that you're necessarily against. I feel next 2 days he's going to have the upper hand and we should be prepared for it. We have to find ways and means to put him down again. It's like a wrestling match.
I'll have to leave it at that since I'm running short of time. But many thanks to you, Lieutenant General Iyer and Group Captain Vinod, and also Professor Chalani. It has been a pleasure to have you on this discussion. And before I call it a wrap, CNN News 18's Zaka Jacob spoke to India's former envoy to Pakistan, Satish Chandra, on the internal turmoil inside Pakistan amid the escalating tensions at the border. Can Pakistan afford a war with India? Listen in.
I'm now joined by former diplomat and former Deputy National Security Advisor, former High Commissioner, Mr. Satish Chandra. Ambassador Satish Chandra, thank you very much. You speak very rarely to television channels, so thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. I just laid out the context of what has happened over the last 2 weeks and where we stand as of today. What is your best assessment of what the situation is right now, and more importantly, where do you see it moving over the next 24, 48 hours?
Good to be with you, Zaka, on your channel. It's a pleasure to interact with you. Well, actually, what's been happening is a repetition of the playbook over the decades. India has always been extremely restrained, to a fault often, in terms of retaliatory steps. I think all of us are very well aware that we have been targets of terrorist actions by Pakistan, and in most cases we have not retaliated, and I think that's been a fault and perhaps has encouraged Pakistan in the belief that they can literally get away with murder. So what has happened, I think there's been a change since with the Modi government in terms of the actions that it had taken in 2016 and 2019. First the surgical strikes and then Bailout. And this has gone a notch higher in terms of depth at which we have struck across Pakistan in retaliation for the Pahalgam attacks. And it's been nine camps which has been struck, both in some in POK and some in Pakistan Punjab, the most notable being Muridke and Bahawalpur, where the terrorist camps were taken out. But as you mentioned ab initio, and as has been underlined by the government of India, that our action was, the kinetic action, was extremely restrained in terms of the fact that we did not hit the military, the Pakistan military, which many feel perhaps we should have, but we did not in the interest of being extremely restrained. We only went for the proven terrorist hideouts from which terrorists had been attacking India from time to time, and also during the Pahalgam incident. Now, the Pakistani reaction, as you indicated, rightly so, has been escalatory, openly, blatantly escalatory. And I do recall from the times when I was in Pakistan, and in fact it is documented, that then Air Marshal Ashgar Khan had said that all the wars with India by Pakistan were initiated by Pakistan. So let's be very clear, I am not surprised, because I have dealt with Pakistan for much of my life, that this is the standard playbook of Pakistan. They will escalate, they will lie, they will try and say that India is escalating, whereas the contrary is correct. Just like they keep saying that they are really had nothing to do with terror, and I think everyone knows the score on that, not only India, but the rest of the world. So I don't need to say anything more on that score.
But the escalation towards what end? Now, when India did the operation and it said, look, we're taking a non-escalatory step, and underlined, the army statement underlined, we're not targeting any military installations, we're not targeting civilians, I thought that was an exit option or an off-ramp for the Pakistani army. But by doing what they did last night, and clearly, as you said, it's an escalatory step, what are they trying to achieve?
I think you must understand two things that are happening in terms of dynamics in Pakistan as I read it. Number one is that the army has lost face in terms of what happened because of our strikes, and they want to prove a point. The army is also very badly divided. In fact, the whole country is divided. So they are trying to somehow, in some way, establish that they are one up on India. That is the endeavor, and they are not going to succeed. And the second point, which is more intrinsic, and I am sorry to say that unfortunately, many of us in India have failed to read Pakistan right. I mean, there is a whole army of people in India saying we must engage dialogue with Pakistan. Yes, that's correct, if Pakistan were a normal country. And again, I will merely relate a conversation or some conversations that I had during my stint in Pakistan as High Commissioner in the 90s. And when I spoke to some people whom I knew rather well within the system, and I said, look, by creating these terror camps, you are actually going to end up hurting yourselves. And in fact, Hillary Clinton also said later on, much later on, something to similar effect. Well, what was the reaction I got? And that's what made me absolutely very, very pessimistic about the future of our relationship. The response was, we don't care as long as it hurts India. So that's the game that they are playing. But, you know, clearly they are not going to, in quotes, win this. Because what we have seen in the last 3-4 days is that they are getting and continuing to get a lot of egg on their face. Okay. And if I may go off script a little bit from your query, I think that this could be very easily sorted out if the international community appropriately pressurized Pakistan. You know, they are going around the world with a begging bowl.
Correct.
And if assistance was stopped, this Pakistani foolishness would also stop. It would be temporary because this is the use of terror against India is a default option as far as Pakistan is concerned. And Zaka, I'll be prepared to discuss with you on a much longer show as to what really we should be doing over long term with Pakistan.
I just want you, since you mentioned international community and the leverage that the international community has on Pakistan, tonight there is the IMF meeting, which will decide whether Pakistan gets a tranche of, I think, about a little over $1 billion from the IMF. That is straight up leverage. Why is the international community not saying that, look, we're not going to give you this money until you correct your behavior?
You are absolutely right. If this is the 25th time, I believe, that Pakistan has gone to the IMF for bailout. They are living from barely hand to mouth. And it's not only the IMF. It is our friends in the Middle East as well, the Saudis, UAE, and you name it, I'm not going to talk to the Chinese because they have another ball game at play. But the rest of the world, yes. If they were to tell Pakistan, you continue this and you're not going to get $1 more, you'll see this stopping. And, but this is the reality with the international community. That's how they are playing it. It's unfortunate, but this is a reality. And I have always believed that at the end of the day, it is up to India, which will have to sort this out with Pakistan itself. Yes, we should do what we are doing. I know we are also going to be, because we are prominent members in the IMF and the World Bank and so on, and in the international community, and our weight is much, much greater than what it was at the time when I was in Pakistan in the 90s. And so we will have a say, and we must have a say. But I may also add something which people may not have paid so much attention to, which is what I have long advocated, that actually, at the end of the day, we have used our Brahmastra, which is keeping the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. This is something which I have been advocating in somewhat similar form over 2 decades plus. And I think that is what will ultimately make Pakistan, in the longer term, even the medium term, bend. They will have to do that because otherwise that country can be destroyed.
All right. And just one final word again on the international community and the IMF meeting, because the United States is the single biggest country which has most weightage at the IMF. They have 17%. Anything above 15% means that they have a veto power. Yes. And today you must have heard what the US Vice President J.D. Vance said. This is not our fight. We're not going to intervene. It's up to India and Pakistan to sort it out. Why do you think the US is taking a sort of hands-off approach?
Well, frankly, I didn't see that statement, but what you say, you can interpret it in many ways, which means that we are not going to intervene either against you. And in the past, pressures have been brought on India as well. So I'm not terribly unhappy, frankly. This is my personal view about it. And they have said this, but behind the scenes, it remains to be seen whether they can and they should. In fact, I think they must
Good evening, you're watching Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. India managed to thwart up to 400 drones that were fired from Pakistan, which targeted about 3 dozen Indian cities from Srinagar and Jammu in the north all the way to Kutch in Gujarat in the west. Today, the Indian government named some of these drones and said that they were of Turkish origin, made by Turkey. Clearly, India is putting not just Pakistan but also Turkey on notice. And that's not all. India has also revealed how Pakistan had taken the cover of civilian air traffic to launch its drone swarms last night. In fact, at the press conference jointly addressed by MEA and MOD officials, it was revealed that there was one flight from Dammam, which was coming to Lahore, entered Pakistani airspace a little past 8 o'clock in the evening, and then the time that it spent in Pakistani airspace from Karachi to Lahore, where it eventually landed at a little past 9 p.m., that window was used by the Pakistani military to launch these drone swarms across the Western Front. What is the state of play right now of this conflict? And most importantly, now that Pakistan seemingly has taken the first step in the escalation ladder, will India match it? Will India retaliate? How does one then get off this escalation spiral? Or now that both sides are locked in, will this only end with one side firmly dominating the escalation over the other?
अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सीमा और नियंत्रण रेखा पर लेह से लेकर सरक्रीक तक 36 स्थानों पर 300 से 400 लगभग ड्रोनों का इस्तेमाल घुसपैठ का प्रयास करने के लिए किया गया। ड्रोन के मलबे की फोरेंसिक जांच की जा रही है। प्रारंभिक रिपोर्ट्स से पता चलता है कि वे तुर्की के असीस गार्ड सोंगर ड्रोन्स हैं। पाकिस्तान का गैर जिम्मेदाराना व्यवहार फिर से सामने आया। 7 मई 2025 को रात 8:30 बजे एक असफल अकारण ड्रोन और मिसाइल हमला करने के बावजूद पाकिस्तान ने अपना नागरिक हवाई क्षेत्र बंद नहीं किया। पाकिस्तान अपने नागरिक विमानों को ढाल के रूप में इस्तेमाल कर रहा है, जबकि उसे अच्छी तरह से पता है कि भारत पर उसके हमले से हवाई रक्षा की तीव्र प्रतिक्रिया होगी। ये भारत और पाकिस्तान के बीच अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सीमा के पास उड़ान भरने वाले अंतर्राष्ट्रीय उड़ानों सहित नागरिक विमानों के लिए सुरक्षित नहीं है। रात में पाकिस्तान के एक सशस्त्र यूएवी ने भटिंडा सैन्य स्टेशन को निशाना बनाने की कोशिश भी की, जिसे पकड़ा गया और उसे निष्क्रिय कर दिया गया।
All right, so here's what happened. This was the intervening night of 8th and 9th of May. This is last night. The Pakistani army resorted to artillery shelling in multiple locations. Then, using that cover and the cover of civilian aircraft, they used drones and projectiles much across the Western Front, all the way from Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Rajasthan, going all the way up to Gujarat. An attack attempt was made on the Bhatinda military station, which was successfully thwarted. In fact, shelling was reported at the line of control in Tangdar, Uri, Poonch, Mindhar, and of course on the other side in the international border, on either side of the international border in Rajouri, Aknoor, Udhampur, Samba and Pathankot. Now, during the joint briefing, India's forces also confirmed that the preliminary forensic analysis of the debris that's been recovered from some of these drowned drones seemed to suggest that they were made in Turkey. In fact, it was identified as the Aziz Guard Songar model, which is commonly deployed for surveillance and precision strikes. Now, that does put Turkey on notice and the relationship between India and Turkey on notice in a way. Because this is what India's total economic engagement with Turkey is. It has acquired new momentum in recent years. There is a considerable increase in trade. In fact, it stood at a little over $10 billion as of 2023-2024. As per the Central Bank of Turkey and the data that they have compiled, Indian companies have invested about $120 million in Turkey, and vice versa. Turkish investment in India is about $200 million as per the Department for the Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Now, there are approximately about 3,000 Indian nationals who are residing in Turkey, most of them mainly in Istanbul. India has helped Turkey in times of crises. Operation Dost, if you remember, when the earthquake, the massive earthquake hit Turkey in 2023, India was one of the first countries to provide urgent relief to Turkey in the wake of the devastating earthquakes. Now, 3 NDRF teams were sent. There was a 99-member medical team that was deployed, over 250 trained personnel, along with specialized equipment, vehicles, and relief material was also sent. But Operation Dost, in return, what India seemed to have got is Dhoka. Operation Dhoka, because India being one of the first early responders in Turkey, medical equipment and relief material worth about 8 tons was sent to Turkey. But unfortunately, in return, all we seem to have got is Turkish drones being used by the Pakistani military to target Indian military and civilian installations.
Pakistan made the preposterous and outrageous claim that it was the Indian Armed Forces and the Indian Air Force that was targeting cities like Amritsar and trying to put the blame on Pakistan. In addition, that we would attack our own cities is the kind of deranged fantasy that only the Pakistani state can come up with. As we saw in the Pahalgam attack, Pakistan is again trying desperately to impart a communal hue to the situation with an intention to create discord. In view of the existing security scenario, the services of the Kartarpur Sahib corridor have been suspended till further directions.
All right, let's try and make sense of what happened last night, this drone swarm, what was the attempt, and what happens here on, what next? Lieutenant General retired D.S. Huda is former Army Commander of the Northern Command of the Indian Army. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us. First things first, I want you to make sense for our viewers of what was Pakistan attempting to do last night. The swarm of drones, now we know 400 of them were employed over 30 plus Indian cities from Srinagar all the way to Kutch in Gujarat. Could this be characterized as, Pakistan climbing the first rung of the escalation ladder?
So, my own sense is, Dhaka, from a purely professional point of view, is this was a probing kind of an attempt to try and see where the vulnerabilities are, because they have attempted this at more than 30 places. See where our air defenses are active. See whether they can find some vulnerabilities that they could attack. Fortunately, the air defense systems have reacted extremely well and made sure there are no casualties. But I see this as a preliminary attempt that in case we have to do something, we have to retaliate, can we find some weak spots in the air defense architecture of the Indian military? I would say this is how they have done this attempt at so many places, starting right from Leh, as was explained in the briefing, right down to Kutch, is to try and expose weak spots in our defensive architecture.
I'm curious if you want to comment on what the army colonel Colonel Qureshi said about this being Turkish-made drones. Is there any light that we can throw on why they're using Turkish-made drones? Because it's quite rare for the army or the government, for that matter, to call out the country of origin where these drones were made.
No, so I think that calling out the country has been with a purpose. So we know that much of the drones that Pakistan military possesses are of Turkish origin. And I think if you look at the statements that have come out, after Pahalgam and after India carried out Operation Sindoor, two countries stand out for their sort of unequivocal support to Pakistan. One is China, which I think has still been measured in their statements. But Turkey has come out very, very openly in support of Pakistan. This is not the first time. So I think for India to call out Turkey for the kind of support they are giving to Pakistan, both military support as well as diplomatic support, I think it's a deliberate sort of step by the Indian government to call out the Turkish government.
I was also curious, I don't know if you felt the same way, It was only Turkey that was mentioned. China was not mentioned, even though you did say that, the two biggest supporters seem to be China and Turkey. Despite the fact that both yesterday, I think in Amritsar, today in Hoshiarpur, some of the remnants of the wreckage that we had from these drones and some of these projectiles that came over clearly seem to have Chinese letters on it. I think some of them have been identified as, I think, the P-15. Any thoughts on why, why the briefing did not mention about Chinese weaponry, even though we know that almost 80% of Pakistani arms currently have either a Chinese origin or jointly made with China?
So you're spot on. Over the last 15 years or so, about 80% of what Pakistan is getting from equipment that they're getting is from China. Why did the government not sort of call out the Chinese government for this? Perhaps given the nature of relations and how the situation at the LAC has just got calmed down, we are trying to improve our diplomatic relations. The Kailash Mansarovar Yatra is about to start. Perhaps, those are the reasons. But as I said, Turkey has come out very strongly, very openly in support of Pakistan, and I think it's right for the government to call out the Turkish government on that.
So General Huda, I want to know what your thoughts are on what happens next. Now, yesterday was this drone swarm, like you said, it was some kind of a probing mission, some kind of an expedition to see, if there are any weaknesses in India's air defenses. Clearly, Pakistan got a bloody nose for that. But these were all drones or projectiles without any explosives, without any kind of warheads attached to them or explosives attached to them. Is the next step going to be that they will have projectiles or drones with explosives, and then what happens after that? Do we progressively go up the ladder? You have short-range rockets and missiles, and then eventually start scrambling fighter jets and so on. Is that the trajectory?
See, I see that as the trajectory. If we think that what Pakistan has done last night and the fact that we've countered them is an attempt to sort of de-escalate the situation, I would sort of be cautious about making that assessment. I do see, and we should be prepared for further action from the Pakistan military. Now, what form and shape it takes, whether armed drones are used, and they could well be used in a standoff role, or Pakistan attempts to use aerial power. We are already seeing extremely heavy firing that's happening on the line of control. So my own sense, and I could be proved wrong, is that it's going to heat up a little more before it cools down.
So how far up the chain can they go? I stopped at scrambling jets, but what after that? Do they start moving your mechanized divisions, your armored divisions? Eventually, do they start moving infantry? At what point of this ladder do both sides get off? And what does it take for Pakistan to get off? Because I think it's clear that, at least from whatever publicly the Indian government officials are saying, we are only responding to what they're doing.
Absolutely. We've said that we do not wish to escalate this. However, the Pakistan military would be under tremendous pressure to show some success. They have been struck in their heartland, which is Punjab, and they would be under tremendous pressure that how are you going to respond to that? Having said that, I also think they'll be cautious about, look, we don't want this to escalate to such an extent, which could lead to what is an absolute ruinous war for them. And again, we can only speculate. I would think, some sort of a demonstrative attack to say, look, we have this capability and capacity to respond to, the Indian attack that has happened. We have not just quietly stood by and accepted what India has done. You could see some demonstrative kind of a strike, a demonstrative kind of an attack to say, look, this is what we can do. Does that provide an off-ramp, for both countries? Really, my sense is the ball is completely in Pakistan's court. And they have to now take a decision as to whether they want to escalate this further or they want to sort of calm it down.
All right.
So, depending on what they do is, I think how we will see this crisis play out.
All right, General Huda, it's always a pleasure listening to you, your thoughts and your perspective. And I think, you would have enlightened a lot of our viewers because everybody's curious to know, I mean, are we at the brink of full-fledged war? What happens next? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so what happened last night? We know that there was this swarm of drones, close to 400 of them, 36 different cities in the northern and western part of India were targeted. But how were they thwarted? Not one of them ended up damaging. There were certainly no, casualties in terms of injuries to folks or even fatalities for that matter. But what exactly did India use in its air defense system to thwart these attacks? India, of course, has a huge edge over Pakistan when it comes to the air defense system. So the L-70, which is developed by the Bofors company, the Bofors Arms Company, produced under its license here in India. It's a 40mm gun. It's modernized with radars, electro-optical sensors. It also has an auto-tracking system. And at one given point of time, in a minute, it can fire anywhere between 250 and 300 rounds. It's got a range of up to 4,000 meters, that's 4 kilometers. The L-70 also excels in anti-drone warfare, saturating the sky with predictive fire, and making it effective against exactly what we saw last night, these drone swarm attacks. Then you have the Shilka, which is a self-propelled system. It's like a self-propelled gun, like your SH howitzers. It's got 4 23mm autocannons that are guided by radar detecting targets. It can detect targets up to 20 kilometers away. It can unleash up to 4,000 rounds per minute. So it's like almost cluster ammunition. Now it's been upgraded with proximity fuse ammunition, and it's got advanced fire control systems. So basically, again, what it does is a counter swarm to a swarm of drones. The Shilka's rapid fire and radar precision make it lethal against UAVs, helicopters, and light armored vehicles. It's also a weapon of last resort, if you will, against, for protecting air bases, moving convoys, as well as sensitive installations. Now, the big question that's being asked is, can Pakistan, and clearly it's Pakistan that's climbing up the escalatory ladder, but how far can they go? And can they afford to do this economically? The last few nights have witnessed heavy artillery shelling. It's in fact happening right now across the line of control. In fact, the last few days it was both the line of control as well as the international border. Pakistan seems to be in no mood to fall back, but their economy cannot handle the strain of war, certainly not beyond a few days. It's been battered by inflation, there is massive debt, there's dependency, of course, on the IMF, and right now, even as we speak, they've gone to the IMF with a begging bowl. Another tranche of over $1 billion is due right now in Washington. So the question is, the ongoing tensions that have been amplified by Operation Sindoor, the Indus Water Treaties put in abeyance, all of this has hugely disrupted trade and investor confidence in Pakistan. It is almost an economic existential risk. It's a very small economy, just barely $350 billion. India, on the other hand, is a $4 trillion economy, more than 10 times the size. So a $350 billion economy does not have the shock absorption capacity, whether it's kinetic action or whether it is these trade bans and water shortages. India, like I said, is now the 5th largest economy, poised to become the 4th very soon. It's positioned to absorb the cost of the conflict much, much more. It's got $680 billion in forex reserves, which is twice of the size of the Pakistan economy. There is very, very little reliance on Pakistani trade or India-Pakistani trade. In fact, the forex reserves in Pakistan are just 15 billion. So India has, again, like I said, almost 9 times that. Now, the question also is that Pakistan's reserves would cover barely 2 months of imports. The IMF has a recommendation of 3 months, the threshold. And like I said, right now they're discussing with the IMF, negotiating with the IMF for the next tranche of $1 billion in what was a $7 billion allocation that's been given to them. It's an aid. Now, if tensions escalate into a full-scale war, then Pakistan's economy could collapse. A 3-month-long conflict would put the cost of something to the tune of $10 to $15 billion. Now, this is based on inflation that's been adjusted for the costs compared to what the Kargil War was. The Kargil War was 25 years ago. It was a 3-month war between May and July. If we were to have a same 3-month war today, Pakistan's entire forex reserves would be wiped out. Pakistan would necessitate emergency loans from either allies like China which is not interested in turning over these loans. In fact, China has refused to change the terms of repayment of these loans. The IMF, of course, like I said, right now they're having a meeting for the next tranche of money. Also, a naval blockade, for example, of Karachi. There was a lot of fake news doing the rounds yesterday that the Indian Navy has hit the Karachi port and that there is a blockade of the Karachi port, etc. But if that were to happen, then that would choke again Pakistan's $30 billion of export, particularly textiles. And textiles make up for about 60% of Pakistani exports. Currently, the Indus Waters Treaty is in abeyance, so if there is a full suspension, that could slash agricultural output by 40%. It would push 15 million rural workers into poverty and drive up food prices by 50%. And that is something that ordinary Pakistanis cannot afford. Foreign direct investment, up to 20% of the $1.8 billion in the first half of FY25, would completely vanish. A war could also displace, and this is the human cost, anywhere between 5 to 10 million people, particularly those in the border regions, and that would strain Pakistan's annual $10 billion social welfare budget. And yet, we have Pakistan's defense minister resorting to blatant warmongering.
अगर टेबल पे बात नहीं होती तो क्या अगली बात बंदूक पे होगी, बंदूक के जरिए होगी?
जी बिल्कुल, then that is the only option left to us. We do not have the luxury of waiting for days. मैंने plural इस्तेमाल किया. We do not have the luxury to wait. This patience will cost us. So we have to stop them right now in the tracks. कि ये चीज जो acceptable नहीं है.
All right, let me go across to Mr. Mukesh Aghi. He's the founder, of course, of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Thank you very much, Mr. Aghi, for joining us. The US seems to be watching from the sidelines right now. We had comments from President Trump, a few days back saying this is between India and Pakistan. They've been fighting for 1,000 years. J.D. Vance yesterday, in his latest remarks, said this is none of America's business. How do you view that? Why is America taking this sort of hands-off-ish approach?
Well, you have to understand that when you have a cross-border terrorism, there has to be a zero tolerance by any nation. And we saw that in the October 7th happened between Gaza and Israel itself. And India has every right to respond and protect his civilian population. Now, as far as the current situation goes, we believe that India has given a response to that terror aggression. And it's up to Pakistan now to have some kind of an exit ramp to be able to manage the current situation. Because a long-term war is not sustainable for Pakistan economy, whereas India, yes, can sustain this up to certain length itself. And the view in the Washington, D.C. is this is not our dog in the fight between India and Pakistan. They should be able to manage this. And that's where the position the U.S. government has taken for time being.
I'm curious about that because this position that America has taken that America does not have a dog in this fight. But if you look at past conflicts, Kargil, even 2019 Bailout, America played a very, very important mediatory kind of role, if not an interventory kind of role, to try and diffuse the situation. This time around, it's a bit hands-off-ish. I talked about what President Trump said, what Vice President Vance said. It's basically the message that seems to be coming out of Washington is their fight, let them figure it out.
No, I don't think so. I think you have to understand, earlier it was the US which would intervene and bail out Pakistan. At this stage, I think India is, I call, fed up with cross-border terrorism. And, earlier it should be okay. India would punch, Pakistan would punch back. And then there will be exit ramp for both countries, and we manage that. But now I think India is saying enough is enough, and we have to stop this. This can't continue going on. And Washington seems to agree from that perspective, saying, okay, guys, you manage it. So while US may not be able to influence so much, but the Chinese, the Turks, the Persians, the Saudis can play a pivotal role trying to counsel Pakistan. This is the wrong direction to go, both from a global perspective and from a regional economic perspective also.
One of the things that, India has been talking about, and right now they are meeting in Washington, D.C., the IMF will be negotiating with Pakistan, or the other way around, Pakistan will be negotiating with the IMF to release its next tranche of $1 billion. And a question that, begs to be asked, and has been asked here in India for a number of years, why does the West, and why does America in particular, because it has veto powers there, effectively veto powers in the IMF, tell Pakistan that, look, you can't continue encouraging all of these terror organizations and expect monies from the IMF? Why are they not making that loan or monies conditional on good behavior by Pakistan?
No, absolutely. I think US should leverage the IMF, not only just from holding on the loan itself, but also look at Pakistan putting back on the grey list. I think it's important to understand that in a global order, you cannot just go across the border and kill innocent people and walk away without any punitive actions itself. I think that era is gone. India has grown as an economy. Now it's the fourth largest economy. Its military power is much, much stronger. So it has a zero tolerance. And I think US realizes that. Okay. And in an indirect way, US is saying, hey, once and for all, just try to sort this one out so we can move on.
Okay, Mukesh Aghi, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us from the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Amidst a barrage of speculation from Pakistani and international media over the alleged military losses in the ongoing Operation Sindoor, a senior government official has told CNN News 18 that India has a proud and consistent history of acknowledging its losses and honouring the brave hearts who laid down their lives in service of the nation. In a poignant reminder of India's tradition of honour, even in conflict, the official recalled an extraordinary moment from history. In fact, let me go across to Siddhant, who has more details on this. Siddhant, so there's a lot of speculation about, did India lose aircraft? How many aircraft did India lose? At least officially, no one is saying that India has lost any aircraft. The official that you spoke to, what did he have to say?
Well, that's right, Zaka. In fact, we are going door to door here in the national capital, perhaps to dig more about Operation Sindoor. And in fact, we have spoken to many officers in the government, in the armed forces, at the Ministry of External Affairs office. And perhaps, there is indeed chatter. And in fact, amidst speculation and the claims that Pakistan has made about India's military loss in Operation Sindoor, perhaps, there is a lot of criticism also that Indian forces are not owning up, etc., etc. So a senior official in the government of India, perhaps I can't name him, Zaka, but he has said this to me, and in fact I would like to read it out for our viewers, and I quote him: "हम दुश्मनी में भी शराफत रखते हैं." And he went on to remind me that how Pakistan's captain, Colonel Sher Khan, was awarded the Nishan-e-Haider on the recommendation of an Indian officer. Perhaps he says that India has a proud and consistent history of acknowledging its losses and honoring the brave hearts who lay down their lives in the service of the nation. In fact, Operation Sindoor is ongoing. As always, we will provide verified details at an appropriate time. Zaka, I have spoken to other officers also. In fact, what they are telling me is that this is not a right time. But any minor detail perhaps going out in media about the operations could affect the future, future success of operations. And this is the reason that, there is a blanket silence as far as the chatter and, claims that Pakistan is making and the speculative stories that are getting published in the foreign media. So, the message is very clear that Indian Army, Indian forces are known for their professional conduct. And perhaps this time around, they are also doing in a very professional manner. It's just a matter of a time since Operation Sindoor is going on. So, before divulging details or perhaps putting out details in public domain, the armed forces are very cautious. The government is very cautious so that Pakistan should not take a mileage of slightest detail being put out in public domain.
All right, Siddhant, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm now joined by former diplomat and former Deputy National Security Advisor, former High Commissioner, Mr. Satish Chandra, Ambassador Satish Chandra. Thank you very much. You speak very rarely to television channels, so thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. I just laid out the context of what has happened over the last 2 weeks and where we stand as of today. What is your best assessment of what the situation is right now, and more importantly, where do you see it moving over the next 24, 48 hours?
Uh, Good to be with you, Zaka, on your channel. It's a pleasure to interact with you. Well, actually, what's been happening is a repetition of the playbook over the decades. India has always been extremely restrained, to a fault often, in terms of retaliatory steps. I think all of us are very well aware that we have been targets of terrorist actions by Pakistan, and in most cases, we have not retaliated, and I think that's been a fault, and perhaps has encouraged Pakistan in the belief that they can literally get away with murder. So, what has happened? I think there's been a change since with the Modi government in terms of the actions that it had taken in 2016 and 2019. First the surgical strikes and then Bailout. And this has gone a notch higher in terms of depth at which we have struck across Pakistan in retaliation for the Pahalgam attacks. And it's been nine camps which has been struck, both in some in POK and some in Pakistan Punjab, most notable being Muridke and Bahawalpur, where the terrorist camps were taken out. But as you mentioned ab initio, and as has been underlined by the government of India, that our action was, the kinetic action, was extremely restrained in terms of the fact that we did not hit the military, the Pakistan military, which many feel perhaps we should have.
All right, sorry for interrupting that interview, but we've got these pictures from the Prime Minister's residence, the Prime Minister having a meeting earlier today with the Defence Minister, the three service chiefs, the National Security Advisor, the service chiefs, of course, of the Army, Navy and Air Force. There seems to be, of course, the body language, of course, everyone seems to be in a slightly more relaxed frame of mind. It was very different from the images that we had a couple of days ago, which the Prime Minister had met with the service chiefs as well as the National Security Advisor and the Defence Minister. I want to go across to our political editor, Aman Sharma, who has more on this. Aman, so this is from the meeting that the Prime Minister had earlier. Visible difference in the body language from the first meeting that we had, pictures of which a few days ago. Clearly, there seems to be a degree of comfort in what India has achieved through Operation Sindoor and a degree of surety that India can handle whatever it is that Pakistan is trying to achieve.
Absolutely, Zaka. These pictures show that the Prime Minister is extremely happy with the performance of the armed forces, not just during Operation Sindoor, but also yesterday, earlier today, in the wee hours when we have repulsed all these 300 to 400 drones fired at 36 locations of India, right from Leh till Sir Creek, as the details were given in the press conference earlier. It seems that the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister are extremely happy with the performance of our armed forces of repulsing, such a massive attack. And earlier in the day, we also saw the Defence Minister meeting the chiefs of the armed forces and the CDS, and where also the body language seemed far more comfortable, far more easy. And it seems that the Prime Minister in this meeting also has been told about how the armed forces went about, retaliating to Pakistan's attack and diffusing all the threats that were fired our way. The details which were given in the press conference. So I think the government looking very, very confident and prepared to retaliate if Pakistan does any other misadventure.
And what is the sense you're also getting from the government that if Pakistan does not do any misadventure, as you said, then is India not looking to amp up on the escalation ladder? Is India only now keen to be seen as responding if Pakistan chooses to escalate this?
Well, yes, Zaka, it is very difficult actually to anticipate what the government could do next, because these are very operational decisions based on strategy and planning. But whatever we heard at the press conference earlier today, the Foreign Secretary saying that our response was measured and our response was responsible. So I think those words indicate that India only responded to the drone attack by Pakistan by sending our own drones and in fact bringing down one of the radars in Pakistan. So India is only responding if Pakistan chooses to retaliate India's objectives so by and far have been achieved by Operation Sindoor, which happened on May the 7th.
Any more further, information that you're picking up in terms of, obviously the guard is up, flight traffic across the northern and western, particularly in the northwestern corridor, the western front, as it were, has been disrupted. The NOTAMs have been issued. What is the outlook, at least for the next few days? Clearly, like I said, the guard is up, but what does India anticipate in terms of, escalatory action from Pakistan?
See, Zaka, I think India is on high alert, and especially the statement which was made at the press conference yesterday by the Foreign Secretary that this drone attack which happened yesterday was also for the purpose of intelligence gathering and to know the readiness of our defense system. So clearly, India does anticipate that Pakistan could replicate such an attack again. This may not be the end from Pakistan, because Pakistan is very, very desperate, also the Pakistani army, to show to its population that it has effectively retaliated against India. But what happened last night was not as per what the Pakistan army had desired to achieve. All its attacks were repulsed by India. So, of course, India is on high alert. India still feels that Pakistan will not give up on such attempts. But given the success which we have seen through Operation Sindoor and also the action last night, India is very confident that it will be able to thwart any such attacks made by Pakistan, because our weaponry and our resolve is far, far bigger than that of Pakistan.
And just one final word, just going back to the press conference earlier today, where I think it was a concerned decision that was taken to name the fact that some of these drones were Turkish made, and also at the same time not mention any Chinese made weapons, even though from the ground we seem to get reports from our reporters and pictures of these weapons, these debris, which seem to suggest that some of these drones or missiles were Chinese made. What do you make of that?
The involvement of that was sent to India for the attack by Pakistan was Turkish made has raised big concerns in the government, Zaka, because Turkey has been a country on which India, has gone out of its way to help. We remember the 2023 earthquake when India began Operation Dost. India was one of the first countries to send aid and material to Turkey to tide over that crisis. But Turkey clearly in this whole conflict between India and Pakistan seems to have chosen the Pakistan camp. In fact, there are big doubts now that this plane from Turkey, which landed in Karachi on April 28th, and subsequent high-level military delegation of Turkey, which paid visit to Islamabad, on April the 30th and had met the Pakistan air chief. Does that have a connection with this huge number of 300 to 400 drones of Turkish origin which have attacked India? India is very concerned about that, and I think that is why India has named that Turkey today in its press conference to say that Turkey, it seems to be siding clearly with Pakistan in this whole conflict.
Okay, Aman, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much. Those pictures from earlier today, the Prime Minister meeting the three service chiefs, the National Security Advisor and the Defence Minister. Now, I want to go back to that press conference that was addressed by Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri and the two armed forces personnel from the Army and the Indian Air Force. One of the things that the Foreign Secretary mentioned was the attack on Bawalpur, which is the headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed. There's a lot of speculation around whether Rauf Azhar, who was one of the key members of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the brother of the founder of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, Masood Azhar, whether he was eliminated, whether he was killed in that attack that happened a couple of nights ago on Operation Sindoor. Now, Rauf Azhar was the person who was responsible for luring American journalist, the Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl, and taking him to Omar Sheikh, who then killed him. This was, of course, a case from many, many years ago. I want to first play out what the Foreign Secretary said. He didn't name Rauf Azhar, but of course, like I said, this speculation has been doing the rounds for the last 24 hours that one of the high-value targets, one of the high-value hits in the Operation Sindoor happened to be Rauf Azhar. Let's listen to what the Foreign Secretary said, and then I'll go across to a friend of Daniel Pearl's to try and get some perspective on that.
You brought up the connection with the tragic death or killing of Daniel Pearl of the Wall Street Journal. The Jaish-e-Mohammed was in some way directly or indirectly responsible for the death of Daniel Pearl. But the real connection is through Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, the British Pakistani jihadi who was held in India, but was finally released in 2000, and he was the person who lured Daniel Pearl to his eventually leading to his murder. So these are all obviously connected figures, connected individuals, connected institutions, and the attack on Bahawalpur, on that facility of the Jaish-e-Mohammed in Bahawalpur is, I would imagine, a fitting part of this unfortunate incident.
I stand corrected. It was Omar Sheikh who lured Daniel Pearl and eventually, of course, to his tragic killing. Asra Nomani is an Indian-American journalist and a former colleague of Daniel Pearl's. She now joins us. Asra, thank you very much for speaking with us. I know there's been a lot of speculation around whether Rauf Azhar was killed or not, but the Bahawalpur headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed has been reduced to rubble. When you saw those pictures, when you heard that news, what did you feel? What went through your mind?
It was haunting for me to see Bahawalpur on the map, because Bahawalpur has been on my map for 23 years. It was where Daniel Pearl went in December 2001, when he was on the trail of the jihadis that have caused so much violence in the world, from India to the United States to Europe. And so Danny went to Bahawalpur. He knocked on the door of Jaish-e-Mohammed, and he saw that despite the claims of General Pervez Musharraf, it was open for business. And what Danny discovered was what we all have known for these decades, that Pakistan has been fomenting a terrorism industry with a headquarters in Bahawalpur. So it was haunting to see Bahawalpur on the map now as one of the places where India struck. It's really important for me to recognize that why this family is important is because Ibrahim, the brother of Masood Azhar, was one of the hijackers on that airplane in 1999 that went from Kathmandu to Kandahar. The man that was killed this week, Masood Azhar, he is the brother, and he was the mastermind of that hijacking. So what happened was that Omar Sheikh was freed because of that hijacking. So I want to just correct the record that this family was not involved in the actual plot to kidnap Danny, just as you mentioned. It was this man, Omar Sheikh.
Yeah.
But it was this industry that created these jihadis that murdered Danny. And that's why it's so important what has happened.
I just wanted to ask you about that. I mean, look, no government official has come forth and confirmed that Rauf Azhar has died. There's a lot of speculation that he was amongst the high-value targets inside Bahawalpur when it was struck on the night of 7th of, or the morning of the 7th of May, when India carried out Operation Sindoor. Have you been able to hear from, either people on the ground in Pakistan, or have you heard from any government official about this operation taking out the man who killed your friend?
I have not. And I think that would be really wonderful if the government of India did communicate with Danny's father. His mother passed away, and his father is very engaged in this battle. His father has fought to keep the men that were convicted in Danny's murder in jail. And we have failed because the Pakistani court system has released those men essentially to house arrest and, very convenient, a good life in Pakistan. And so I would invite that kind of communication. And I know that Danny's dad is very relieved that this issue is in the front again, because the truth is justice has been denied Danny Pearl all these years.
All right, Asra Nomani, we share your sense of grief, sense of hurt, sense of loss, and now hopefully, in some measure, a sense of closure, a sense of justice more than closure about losing your friend Daniel Pearl, and now the killers being avenged. Thank you for joining us, Asra. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I want to move on back to the developments around the situation between India and Pakistan. In an exclusive interview with India's ambassador to the United States, Vinay Quatra, he again reiterated the government of India's position that what India is seeking to do is not go to war with Pakistan, it is to go to war with these terrorists. He said explicitly so when he was pressed by Wolf Blitzer at CNN whether India was at war with Pakistan. He said, no, it's not with Pakistan, but with terrorism and with terrorists. Listen in to this exclusive conversation.
It looks like the situation, the tensions between these two nuclear-powered countries, India and Pakistan, is escalating. Is that true?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the CNN. When you talk of tensions and when you talk of escalation, what I would say is that the original escalation or the original breakout of tension happened on 22nd of April, when you had 4 terrorists backed by Pakistan carried out killings, brutal killings, subhuman, monstrous kind of killings of 26 civilians.
Indian civilians.
25 of them Indian nationals, 1 of them Nepali national. And the brutality of the killings, they essentially kill them in front of their innocent wives, in front of their innocent children. They gave them headshots, and they did so on the basis of religion. So they killed all non-Muslims who were there in the group. They identified their religion, and then they went on to proceed to kill them. So what we did day before yesterday was essentially our response to terror, our response to these subhuman...
when you say what you did yesterday, meaning the escalation in the military response.
As I said, the original escalation was on 22nd of April. And when that happened, we had clearly said that, we are a responsible country. We will have a very measured, calibrated, proportionate, responsible response. And that's what we did day before yesterday. What we did was we took out the terror factories at 9 locations in Pakistan and in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Took them out where they trained them, they equipped them, they armed them, they organized them. Those are the facilities which we took out. We were very careful in excluding the military establishment, the socialist structures, and economic infrastructure. We were very, very cautious, careful in keeping our targets only to those people and their backers who carried out these dastardly killings on the 22nd.
All right, it's not just the Indian ambassador to the United States. The Indian High Commissioner to the UK has also spoken with the international press in an exclusive interview with Sky News. He showed, Vikram Doraiswamy, he showed proof of military backing to terrorists in Pakistan. He showed a photograph which shows Pakistani military officers standing behind an internationally sanctioned terrorist. Let's play out what that interview was all about and who is this internationally sanctioned terrorist that Vikram Doraiswamy was alluding to.
High Commissioner, I just have a minute left, but I've spoken to a retired general who in Pakistan